live now.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining us for M365 Chicago virtual event. I'm so grateful that you've joined this session. And we're going to tackle in the next 50 minutes or so on how you can ensure operational governance for Microsoft Teams. So a couple little housekeeping here. Please drop questions in the Q&A if you have any. And this session, all the resources that I'll walk you through, I'll definitely make it available to you once we're done. My name is Dux Raymund Sy, and I serve as the Chief Brand Officer at AvePoint. And I'm so grateful that I've been a Microsoft Regional Director and MVP for the past couple of years. So let's jump right ahead and let's get this conversation started. What we're going to cover in the next 45 minutes is we're going to tackle these 4 key questions. Number 1, why govern teams? What's the big deal? Second, we'll talk about what do you need to govern as you think about teams. And then I'll walk you through tips on how you right-size governance. And last but not the least, as we all know, governance and adoption goes hand in hand. So I'll walk you through tips and tricks and resources on how you can ensure sustainable adoption. And if there's anything specific that you would like to learn, please pop it in the Q&A right now and just say, hey, Dux, I want to learn about this or that. I'll definitely cover a lot of ground. And if I see your feedback, if I get the chance, I'll definitely highlight that as well as we progress through this session. So why govern teams? As we all know, Teams is the hub for teamwork. Teams is really a conglomeration of multiple capabilities. Teams allows us to communicate through chat and calls and meetings, which traditionally Skype provided, or as the industry would always compare Zoom. That's kind of the Zoom functionality, or Skype, all that good stuff, or WebEx. And then the second layer, the second capability that Teams offers is in the area of collaboration, which we'll focus on today. This is where traditionally SharePoint provided this capability, but Teams took it to the next level. So now when we think about collaboration, you can have real-time conversation threads, or you can add apps into your collaboration, which is really, really powerful. Third, you can extend Teams with third-party apps or custom apps that you can build in. We've seen a lot of innovation from Microsoft beyond the apps that you can get from the Teams store. You can also do things with Power Platform through Project Oakdale, for example, or you can even build your custom apps through Azure and the Bot Framework or Q&A Maker, which there's tons of possibilities bringing in your internal technologies and integrating it with Microsoft Teams as that one-stop shop. Last but not the least, with the benefit of Microsoft 365, you can work confidently as it's streamlined and as it's integrated with all the other capabilities of Microsoft 365. So why do we need to govern teams? This was a Gartner report that was published more than 2 years ago. Essentially, it says, look, Teams will be as common as Outlook. And I'm sure we're seeing that now, especially in the last 6 months as people work remotely. And it's a good thing. However, this report from 2.5 years ago essentially provided some guidance and caution as well. So I highlighted this paragraph. So let me kind of quickly read through this. It says, by default, anyone can create an Office 365 group, which is now known as Microsoft 365 group. Therefore, anyone can create a new team in Teams. However, history has shown that allowing this privilege can go ungoverned will result in users creating workspaces on impulse. Remember SharePoint? Such workspaces can be abandoned because their creators failed to promote them. For example, you may recall SharePoint. Some organizations saw the creation of hundreds, perhaps thousands of sites with little thought given to why those sites were needed. So this is the challenge that we're seeing throughout a lot of different organizations. That's only one aspect why governing teams is critical. The second aspect is really making sure that you understand how Microsoft 365 Group works. In case you're not familiar, Groups powers the entire collaborative capabilities of Microsoft 365. So when you think about Teams, SharePoint, Yammer communities, Outlook groups, all these things rely on Microsoft 365 groups. In Microsoft 365 groups, think of it as a membership provider. It's not an app, it's not a technology similar to Teams, but it's a membership provider similar to Azure Directory Security groups, where really it's like a keychain that holds all the technologies a common group of people use and make sure that it has the relevant security and relevant access for the right people. So it's essentially a keychain of technologies that's being used by the same group of people. And to date, there's over 22 Microsoft 365 apps that leverages Microsoft 365 groups. So specific to Teams, right? In case you're not familiar, how does it work with Microsoft 365 group? So when we create a team, for example, first of all, let me ask you this question. By default, how many teams can an individual create in Microsoft 365? If you know the answer, pop it in the Q&A and we'll take a quick look. So when you create a team, what happens behind the scenes is a Microsoft 365 group is created. And along with that Microsoft 365 group, multiple other technologies gets created as well. So when you create a team, a Microsoft 365 group gets created, which creates a SharePoint site collection, an Outlook calendar, a planner, a OneNote notebook. Now, these things that get created are not optional. It gets created anytime a Microsoft 365 groups get created. And then essentially these technologies support Microsoft Teams because, as most of you know, Teams by itself relies on all the other Microsoft 365 technologies. While Teams can provide the calling capabilities, the meetings and the chats and the conversation threads, everything else relies on the other Microsoft 365 apps. SharePoint, for example, is a content service. It provides the capability for each team to have a library. It provides the capability to use Microsoft List, for example. Outlook Calendar provides that shared calendaring capability for the team. Planner for task management. And then again, OneNote is allowing the team to have that shared notebook. Now, why is this a big deal, right? Why do I have to think about governance in this context? You know, in the past, when we worried about SharePoint, realized that SharePoint is only a single container. What we're looking at now, friends, working with Microsoft Teams, right now, at least in this picture, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different containers. And what I mean by containers is a container is essentially a place where you can put data in. And data could be in the form of a chat, Word document, presentations, pages. So now you have more containers where data can live in, but at the same time, we're also trusting that whoever created the team would do the right thing, making sure they only provide access to the right people, making sure that, let's say, once a team is not being used, do they delete it? Do they keep it for retention or records management? So we're putting a great responsibility to the Teams owner, and we assume they're going to do the right thing. But what if they don't know or they forget, right? Where would this data live? Do we need to keep it? Do we not to keep it? Do we don't need to keep it, right? So all these things really falls under in the area of governing teams. So talking about teams, talking about why we need to govern teams. So what do we need to govern, right? It seems like it's such a big word, governance, such a big word, that how can I focus and what are some of the priorities of governance? Well, the good news is there's really 3 key things you have to think about and consider. First and foremost, you have to look at how are you going to govern the provisioning of teams? How are you going to govern who gets to create teams, who needs to approve it or not, or what the model is. Is it everybody could do self-service, or it's only limited to a few, or only IT can do it? So that's one area of governance. You govern provisioning. However, governance, it's not just about provisioning. A lot of people limit governance to Teams provisioning, but really there's two other key areas of governance. Second area is, how do you govern the ongoing management of teams? Once the team is created, how do you make sure that policies are enforced? People aren't randomly inviting people. Certain pieces of content are restricted because there may be confidential information, right? So how do you govern that? How do you make sure people are doing the right thing? And then the third pillar around governance is the idea of governing information lifecycle. Once the team is not being used anymore, what happens to it? Does it just sit there? Does it just linger away through time? Or do you want to delete everything? Or do you only want to keep certain pieces of content because of industry regulations or compliance? So these are the three key areas that you have to really focus on with respect to governance. So let me zoom in each area and highlight key considerations around governance for that pillar. So let's talk about provisioning, right? So the idea with governing provisioning is, first and foremost, we want to minimize sprawl. We want to minimize people doing things randomly, meaning, they randomly create teams because they just feel like it, right? We have to have a model where purpose needs to be defined and an understanding why teams are created needs to be established, which we'll talk about later. Second is you want to minimize duplication. And I've worked with a lot of customers in their environments. Unfortunately, let's say I want to create a team called marketing. Another person can actually do it. Behind the scenes, technically, what Microsoft 365 would do, if it sees a new teams being created with the same name, it would just change the ID on the back end. But what the users see, it's still going to be called marketing. So potentially there may be two teams that's called marketing that gets created. Third is we want to make sure that teams that are provisioned are appropriate. You want to make sure, this kind of relates to the next one, whatever you call the team is relevant, right? Not just random team names. Maybe you want to have a structure like a prefix before the team name, especially if you're a large organization. You may want to put the business unit or the purpose and then the team name itself. And then lastly is, how do you want to catalog and classify the teams? For highly regulated organizations, you may want to take advantage of labeling capabilities or tagging capabilities, because through time, if you get audited, that's how you can organize and look for specific teams, and in some cases, specific content in the team. So these are some key considerations for how you govern provisioning. Now, how do you govern the ongoing use and ongoing management of teams? So certainly you can monitor the usage. You can take advantage of the Office 365 Admin Center to see traffic, to see adoption. But beyond that, right, the last thing we want is to be reactive when bad things happen. Like, for example, a team owner may inadvertently open up access to people who's not supposed to get access, or documents get shared to those that it's not supposed to. So the question now is, how do we enforce policies? I mean, we expect people to do the right thing, but are we sure that every single person will know every single rule on what to do and not to do? And then specific to SharePoint, right? Like, for those that use SharePoint before, in our previous life, we never let people have site collection admin access. But what's going on today with Teams is every time a team gets created, the team owner is also the SharePoint site collection admin, which means there's a lot of capabilities that they can take advantage of and potentially a lot of issues they can cause, right? So how do you govern the ongoing management of these things? And lastly, how do we govern the full information lifecycle of a team? How do we decide if we get rid of the team because it's not being used anymore, or keep it because we have to subscribe to Sarbanes-Oxley compliance, for example, where financially related data has to be stored for 7 years? So we need to balance all these things and make sure that the full life cycle of the team and the content in it is appropriately stored or gotten rid of if need be it. So these are the three core pillars of governance of Microsoft Teams. So now how do we do it, right? So we talked about why govern teams. We talked about what to govern. And the third point I want to tackle is, okay, how do we do it? How do we right size governance for teams? Well, first of all, if you step back, there are primarily three layers of governance you can employ. Definitely, it's not a one size fits all. So at the highest level, there's going to be tenant-wide governance and policies that we need to have, right? This applies to everybody. And this addresses general productivity, security, and compliance needs. So for example, let's say you work in a highly regulated industry. By default, external access not allowed, right? By default. Or guest access, I should say, guest access, right? And then next, at the next layer, depending on what department you're in, again, the needs may differ. We can address unique specific needs of specific departments or divisions. So let's say marketing. Again, I pick marketing because I'm in the marketing department. Let's say marketing needs to work with vendors and you're using Teams. So maybe as a part of policies, anytime there's a vendor engagement and vendor interaction, we allow the vendor access. And then lastly, you may have specialized services for smaller groups. So let's say you're a global organization. Marketing requirements in the US may be different than Germany, right? So for our German marketing team, they may have additional services or additional policies that we have to put into Teams across provisioning, management, and information lifecycle. So how do you do it? The first step is identify organizational level policies, department divisional level, and if in case there's specialized services for smaller groups, identify those. And what it would look like is something like this, right? So we paint a picture here of common things like external sharing, retention, provisioning, recertification. And you can have essentially like a swim lane here where you have department or division and kind of map out their needs around using Teams. Now, in this section, we have, I'm just going to go through this quickly. Let's say the first column is legal, right? So legal, no external sharing, retention expiration 6 months after last access. All requests goes through central IT and we recertify after 3 months. Whereas Department B, we're going to allow external sharing because they're marketing, and then retention expiration 12 months after last access, and recertification after 6 months. Now, for those not familiar with recertification, essentially what this is saying, after a certain period of time, we will recertify. We'll double check if those people in the team should still be in the team, or do we need to take off people, or we need to add different people into it. So that's the whole concept of recertification. So by looking at this picture, now you have to do an inventory. How do you make this happen? How do you do this, right? There are things you could do out of the box, but as you will find, it's very limited. So out of the box with Microsoft 365 E3 or E5, if I'm just looking at this picture, I mean, I can't really do this out of the box, right? I would need to, oh, maybe, yeah, external sharing, I can turn it on and off for the whole company. But to this level of tailoring, it's going to be tough. You would need to write PowerShell scripts and experts around PowerShell to maintain those, which is fine if you have those resources. The next option is you may, if your organization already have Azure ADP 1, this is a separate license from Microsoft 365, and Azure ADP 1 can provide some more capabilities alongside PowerShell to make things like this happen. Another option is certainly you can employ and take advantage of third-party solutions out there, which there's a lot. So the whole gist of our focus here is when you think about governance is, you know, we want to make it easy for people to do the right thing. That's what I keep telling organizations. As IT, our job is to make it easy for people to do the right thing. Like, imagine if you set all this up behind the scenes on the back end and it's automated without users having to remember all these rules, right? Then the likelihood of them using Teams in a way you'd like them to is high. And that's also true with using things like templates. Templates are great. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with templates. But in addition to templates, what I highly encourage is it should be more than just channels and configuration. Microsoft has done a great job in providing templating capabilities already with Teams. In fact, they even have some sample templates. But what I would encourage you is also to apply all the policies within it, where beyond just the template, you can say, okay, if Dux is from HR, we're not going to allow external sharing. Once Dux is using the team, he can't change permissions, or he can't create a subsite within SharePoint. So building in all those policies is equally as important. So let me show you an example. Let me do a quick demo here. So this is my Microsoft Teams environment, and in my company, we have all the governance policies defined already in Microsoft 365, including Teams. We have policies around provisioning, around ongoing management, and then third, information lifecycle. We use a combination of what's available out of the box to make it happen, and also technologies that we have as a company for governance. So in this case, in this scenario, I use cloud governance. Now, as a user, right? So based on our organizational policy, the only way for me to create teams is through a self-service approach as well. And this self-service approach is not using the Microsoft out-of-the-box self-service. In my company, we deploy this app called MyHub. MyHub is an app that helps you centralize all the workspaces in Microsoft 365, not just Teams, but it shows up in Teams. And part of what I could do here is I can create a team as well. So it's very similar to self-service. So, but as I go through this process, let's say I'm in HR, so I'm going to create a team for HR onboarding. What's happening here is behind the scenes, the technology based on the policies we built, it knows that, oh, Dux is from HR and he's creating a team for employee onboarding. So it's going to pick the ready-made template for employee onboarding. It has the ready-made channels and tabs and what have you. And then in addition, it's also going to apply the appropriate policies. Now, what are those policies? Well, Dux is in HR. Part of the policy is that when he creates a team, his boss has to approve it. That's one. So instead of waiting for IT to approve me, my boss will get an alert as soon as I finish this creation. And my boss can review the request, and my boss can approve or reject this request to create a team. So that's one. Number two is once approved, now I have the team as for employee onboarding, but there are policies in there that's automatically kicking in. Things like I cannot do external sharing, I cannot create SharePoint subsites, etc. So all of that is automated. So I see all these things, I hit next, purpose, collaboration, what region, team name, November 2020, onboarding, right? So I could do that, and notice that a suffix is automatically added, _US, and then I can hit submit. So now as I hit submit, what's happening? Notice it says this HR onboarding is submitted, and my boss, let's just imagine my boss will get an alert in Teams through the MyHub app as well. And then he or she can see all the to-do lists. So once the approval shows up here, he can look at the properties of the team and then just say approve or reject, right? So it makes it simple, makes it easy for people to do the right thing. And also the enforcement of policies is built in. Now, what about self-service out of the box, right? Let's say, well, Dux, the app is great, it's cool, but I still want to use this out of the box self-service capability. How do I do it? So what we could do is, in this scenario, right, we're creating a team out of the box. We still have all our governance policies already set up behind the scenes. Like I said, we're using out of the box capabilities and also a technology called AppPoint Cloud Governance. So we put in all the policies. So in this scenario, my colleague Adele is creating a team for marketing, and it's just using out of the box capability. So what's going to happen here, friends, is as soon as Adele hits submit, our cloud governance technology would see it, would pick that up, and would apply the policies that's appropriate. And what's the policy? Well, for our company, for marketing, every time somebody in marketing creates a team, he or she can use the team for 7 days. And within that 7 days, the marketing leader should approve it. If it's not approved, that team will go away. If it's approved, then they can continue using it with the policies already enforced. So in this case, notice as soon as Adele finishes creating that team, she can use it, but she did get a alert saying, hey, Adele, look, awesome, you created a team, but based on our policy, your boss will have to approve it within 7 days. We already notified your boss, and if your boss does not approve it, sorry, we have to get rid of it, or something like that, right? So that way, you have a good balance of empowering people, but also enforcing governance across provisioning, ongoing management, and also the full information lifecycle. If you want to learn more, this is a great free ebook you can download on how you can tailor Microsoft Teams for your organization and make it easy for people to do the right thing. Now, any questions so far? If you have any questions, feel free to pop it in the Q&A, and I'll be more than happy to address it. Okay. All right. The last part. So we talked about why govern teams, the why. We talked about the what to govern. We talked about the provisioning, ongoing management, and information lifecycle. And lastly, and then we talked about the how, right? I talked about right-sizing governance. So I showed you examples on ways to govern teams. Lastly is the value of ensuring sustainable adoption. So how do we do this? We all know that you can have the best technology. If people don't use it, doesn't matter. And the hardest part about all this is change. Change is often met with resistance, as we know, and we want to make sure that we get over this hurdle. So what's the goal here? The goal is to make sure that adoption is not a one-time event. The goal is adoption should sustain through time. In fact, one of the industry research finds that it takes about 15 to 18 months for a whole organization to adopt Microsoft 365. And in order to sustain throughout that time period and beyond, you got to make sure you have to have a sustainable adoption program. And the goal of the program is to really minimize the negative impact of technology changes. We want to promote the consistent use and adoption of Teams and provide users with resources they need to be successful. So what we're doing here, friends, is we're bridging the gap between business activities, people, and then the technology itself, which is Microsoft Teams. So let me walk you through 3 tips here and examples on how to ensure sustainable adoption. Number 1 is make it easy to do the right thing. I already shared this. I keep talking about this, but our goal as IT is we got to put those guardrails, and as our colleagues start bowling, if you may, if they haven't, the guardrails will make sure that the likelihood of them hitting the pins would be quite high. How do we make it easy for people to do the right thing? 3 core areas. Number 1, focus on business scenarios. Instead of generic, oh, you know, here's a team, here's a channel, here's a tab. Focus on use cases such as project management, marketing, sales. How can they leverage teams for that purpose? Enforce policies by automating governance. We talked about that already at length, right? You build in all the policies and the automation for provisioning, ongoing management and information lifecycle. That gives the user a better way and an easier way to use Teams correctly versus trying to remember all the things they have to do. Lastly, we specify the rules of engagement. So some examples. This is an example on how you identify a business use case, right? So what we could do is we partner with the business and look at some of the pain points that they have. And you could just fill in the blanks for this. As someone in sales, I want to have a single version of the sales proposal so everybody can access rather than managing it via email. Using what? Using Microsoft Teams to centrally store and share a single version of a proposal that we can edit together using co-authoring, right? And essentially, you can have a team, you drop it in a SharePoint library. I'll know when this is successful when my sales team creates proposals more easily, giving them more time to close deals, right? So just the collaboration aspect of it makes it much more effective versus email. So to make it easy for people to do the right thing and use it, again, focus on use cases. Teach them, this is how you do sales proposal. And oh, by the way, we're going to use Teams for it, right? So show them the before and after. Sending email back and forth is not as efficient, whereas if we use Teams, much more efficient. And maybe start with that, right? And then through time, they can learn all the features and capabilities of Teams. Another example is provide rules of engagement. In this case, like when to use what. I get this all the time. People ask me, like, how do you provide context into what tools to use when? As we all know, Microsoft 365 has over 22 apps. But for me, focus on the core ones, make it simple. And what are the core ones? The core technologies for communication collaboration are three things: Yammer, Teams, and SharePoint. And the way I describe it is this. Look, Yammer is like your cafeteria. You go to Yammer, catch up with folks, talk about what's going on. It could be in the same department or different department. And it's just a good social community where people can connect. That's what Yammer is for. Whereas Teams is used to get work done. Think of it as like a conference room where it's only limited to a few people, and this is where people get stuff done. They talk, they work on documents, what have you. And then SharePoint serves as your library. This, SharePoint allows you to store knowledge. You can use communication sites, for example, for your internet. In the context of team, it's a library where content is stored. So that's what SharePoint is for. And in addition, friends, we also, where did I put that? Okay, let me grab it here real quick. So what we also do, at least for our company, is we have a collaboration workbook. So any new employee here at AppPoint will get to see all the different tools, but more importantly, we explain what it's for. Outlook is used for this. Teams is used for that. SharePoint is used for this, right? So we set the standard and we set expectation on how we use it in our organization. So that way, there's clarity, there's expectations that's set, and we're not assuming people figure out how to use all of this. Somebody's asking, will I provide this PowerPoint? Absolutely. So I'll provide this PowerPoint, all the resources I've shown. So for example, if you all are interested in the collaboration workbook I just shown, let me know as well. I'll put that in the kit that I sent over. Yeah. The second tip to drive sustainable adoption is facilitate leadership buy-in, right? So we highlight the financial benefits of Microsoft 365 and Teams, especially now that we're all remote. We can demonstrate better transparency using Teams versus everything stuck on email. And then lastly, we can also showcase how we can ensure security as well. We all know that security is top of mind for a lot of leaders today. So here's an example of better transparency. So for me, as a leader in a marketing organization, we've shifted how we work. Pretty much no more email, no more disparate technologies. The organization I'm in, we're a team of about 50 people around the world, and we use Teams. We use Teams to get stuff done, to communicate, to celebrate, and it just provides better transparency across the board. We can see what everybody's doing across different organizations or across different subgroups within the marketing organization. So this is really, really good. The other area is you want to ensure security. Obviously, security is top of mind for a lot of folks. One of the questions I always get from customers is that, Teams is great, but it's also quite easy to share stuff. For example, how do we know which documents are shared outside of the team, or who's sharing what? How do we know who's accessing stuff? Because one challenge is I can share a Word document, and that Word document can be shared to another person that I don't know, right? So make sure that you provide all the mechanisms in place. So in this example, I'm using a technology called Policies and Insights, where it watches our entire tenant. So at an individual level, I'll know how many anonymous link was shared or not, if there's sensitive items, and then not only know about it, but take care of it and deal with it as well. So my second tip is, if you want to get leadership buy-in, make sure you're in top of how you want to secure your environment, which obviously includes Teams. Third tip is you want to ensure quick wins. So we talked about making it easy for people to do the right thing, get leadership buy-in. We want to ensure quick wins. We want to activate champions. Champions are individuals outside of IT, because if you want adoption and you want to enforce governance, IT alone can't scale. So we need to get these colleagues out in the organization that are excited, that are proponent for new technologies, and they can generate enthusiasm. They can help others to do the same. And they know, they're the boots on the ground. They know what's going on in the field. So they can help you identify challenge and opportunities and how Teams can be used. Microsoft, in fact, has a fantastic playbook on how you can set up a champions program. So there's the link right there. So make sure you check that out. And then lastly is you got to have consistent rollout and consistent wins. You don't want analysis paralysis. So one of the things that I work with customers a lot is, from the get-go, have a 90-day rollout plan, where in a measured way, you can roll out Teams and consistently showcase the value of it with governance layered in. So for example, month 1, right? You identify 3 use cases, you get leadership buy-in, and develop your rules of engagement and put resources in place. And then month 2, get 3 departments to pilot it, identify what works or doesn't, and configure Teams to support these use cases for the entire company. And then month 3, you do company-wide rollout. In fact, I have a, let me show you. So this is a full-on project schedule of a 90-day deployment of Microsoft Teams, from soup to nuts, from planning and scoping to POC to pilot phase to rollout phase, etc. And once you roll it out, how do you maintain it and operationalize it? What type of help desk support you need to have? So if this is something you're keen on as well, I'm happy to share this too. All right. So I'll make sure I share all these resources in the admin and governance channel, so you can download all this stuff. So that's the third tip, right? So I made sure, I saved some time for Q&A, But we've tackled a lot of good stuff, right? Again, we talked about why govern teams, what do I need to govern, how do I right-size governance, and then lastly, how do I ensure sustainable adoption and the value of governance to adoption. So with that, before I open up to questions, two things I want to share. First and foremost is I host a regular podcast called ShiftHappens with leading organizations worldwide. So we've had Heathrow Airport, Microsoft, FedEx. They talk about their adoption and governance tactics. Very short, very straight to the point, and you can learn a lot from colleagues. So go to your favorite podcast platform, just look for ShiftHappens. Another thing is, yesterday we launched a fund drive to help relief efforts of victims of Typhoon Ulysses in the Philippines. This has been the worst typhoon this year. A lot of people were affected, thus far over 200,000. What I ask from everybody is check out the link. Essentially, you can donate to the Philippine Red Cross any amount. You forward your donation to philanthropy@apppoint.com, and AppPoint will match your donation. So this is something we launched yesterday. Anybody can participate, share it with your colleagues, take a screenshot of this, and I'll share this in the chat as well. So the more we can help, the better. So with that, let me check all the chat here in Q&A for questions. All right. So let's see here. So a couple questions here. So yes, I will provide the link to all this stuff. And again, this is my contact info. Feel free to connect with me, and would love to chat with you if you have questions. Travis, yes, Travis, I still remember in Atlanta. It's 2012. Time flies by. Yeah, I still have that kilt. I haven't worn it in a long time. Thank you for that great memory. Michelle, collaboration workbook. Yep, we'll definitely provide that for you. What to use when collaboration workbook? Absolutely, we'll share that. Okay. Other questions? Any other questions I can help everybody with? What do you think of this presentation? Would love your feedback too. Just pop it in the Q&A. I would just love to know if this was helpful, you want to learn more, or if there's anything missing. Again, I'm quite open to that. Okay, so again, connect with me on LinkedIn for other questions. I'll pop all these resources into the admin and governance chat. Massive thanks to all of our sponsors. And if you want to learn more around the governance solution I talked about, check out our Teams, AppPoint Teams channel. You'll get to see demos there, and our colleagues would definitely show you more stuff. And the Microsoft 365 Chicago is also supporting the public school fund. So any donation is greatly appreciated. All right. So this is the feedback form that if you can fill out, that would be also greatly appreciated. Let's see. Let me check. Got it. Working within division for large organizations, are any tips for what to get started to help engage rules policies from the middle? Absolutely. Let me show you an example. Let me share my example, Michelle. So let me give you context. So we are a 1,500 people company, not that big, but I look after the marketing organization. So when we first got Teams, certainly on the technology platform, so remember the earlier when I talked about, let me go back here. Give me 1 second. I want to show you the policies. This is right. So a company level, we had tenant-wide policies, things like no external access. At that time, we didn't allow external access, right? But then we also had divisional policies that was put in place. So for marketing, we were part of the exception, where in some cases we could do external access. And then as a team, personally, I had specific requirements to my organization. So we started with this, and we looked at what's the most common denominator across the company that we can employ, right? So let me walk you through a very specific example I did for my team. So just like in fact, let me pull up let me bring up Teams so I can kind of show you here. Okay, so here. So just like any organization, we use a bunch of tools. So the marketing department, we had email, we have SharePoint sites, we have file shares, we had, third-party tools, whatever, right? So there's a bunch of stuff. IT put all the policies in place, all the automation in place. But to get started, talking about use cases, we started with baby steps. I did not expect my colleagues to switch to Teams full on in one day. So the first use case is this. The first use case is we will stop doing group emails. Very simple. As you know, we're so used to firing up an email and putting everybody's names and then start talking or start working, right? So as a leader, I brought this up to the marketing team. I said, the first thing we're going to do, the first use case, is to get rid of group email when we collaborate. I will be committed to that as a leader, and I expect the same from everybody. So look at this example. My colleague Spencer shared this message, new webinar, August 7, delegating administration. And you can see, hey everyone, we have a webinar. Here's the link to the landing page and the graphics page. Can the following that are tagged please help with distribution and promotion? Megan do this, Sarah do that, etc. So if you look at this, friends, it looks like any other email, right? It looks like a group email, but we know what's going to happen if this was a group email. Questions will be flying back and forth, reply all, and documents will be attached. It's a mess. But then as a result of doing this or communicating this way, first of all, everybody that was tagged most likely liked it. So that means they confirm that they saw it. But second, since this was posted in a channel, colleagues that's not part of this conversation thread also saw it. So now they knew what was going on and they can like it as well. In the past, if this was email, it's just going to be stuck on these people's email inboxes. But at the same time, other people were able to bring other people into the conversation. Hey, Annie, can you split this? Spencer, can you do that, right? So all the conversation is in an organized fashion. The third benefit to this, friends, is that if we have a new employee that joins marketing, well, guess what? Instead of forwarding them tons of emails left and right, they can just scroll through the conversation threads and get a good understanding of how we work and recent activities, and onboarding would be much quicker. So that was the first use case, right? So when you're asking what are some of the initial things you can do, this is simple. Get rid of group conversation. And that's the other part. If you want to introduce something new like this, you got to get rid of all the way. So I told people no more group email. It took us 3 weeks to get used to doing this. But boy, I got to tell you, fast forward to today, this is how we work. This is how we communicate. No more group email. So if we look at the general channel, right? So now our marketing team, general channel, we have all the posts. All of our work is here, all of our files, tab to our intranet, to our Yammer environment, our Jira environment, our Power BI, our GTM Central, so we just live and breathe and work here. So truly, this is the one-stop shop to get our work done. And boy, it just revolutionized how we work, right? So hopefully that's a long-winded way to answer your question, Michelle, but hopefully that provided some context and ideas for you to get going. And like I said, all the resources I'll share with everybody will have examples there. In fact, let me bring up this in case you want to check out stuff and you can't wait for those links I'm going to share. Just go to apppoint.com resources, and we have tons of ebooks. So the ebook I was highlighting earlier is here. So you go to apppoint.com resources, and you just go to ebooks. So here I've got the ebook to the tailoring teams. We also have an ebook when to use when to use what, how to do rockstar meetings in teams. So we have tons of good stuff here. Apppoint.com/resources. So that's one area. Another area is apppoint.com/blog. We post blog every single day around specific Microsoft 365 topics. All right, let's see. Okay, so it looks like my playlist is up there. Let me jump right back into the chat here. Okay, got it. So great question. So Michelle, I'm not sure what you're asking about getting a list of distribution groups from leads. I'm not sure what you're asking for, but somebody's asking, is group email just within your department? What about CCs to other department? Very good. So let me give you paint a picture, right? So the rule I establish is the work we do in marketing, you know, if there's others involved, that's other stuff. But what I'm talking about is this marketing team is only limited to marketing. Nobody else can come in, right? We don't want too many cooks in the kitchen. So the idea, here's kind of the workflow, friends. In marketing, remember the example I showed? Teams is like the conference room. We get stuff done, right? So let's say in marketing, we're building, I don't know, a new brochure. So we work on it here. And when the final product is done and we need to share it with the rest of the company, where do we stick that in? Well, this is where we stick it in SharePoint Online. So this is part of our intranet. So we have resources that's accessible by everybody in the company, you know, to our HR site. We have a site called GTM Central in our intranet. And this is a site where we have all of our templates, brochures, graphics, all of our 1,500 employees can access. So when marketing creates a brochure, once it's done, we store it here. Obviously, it's read-only for everybody. So if they want a brochure or a PowerPoint about AvePoint, they can get it here, right? In all languages. So now you see the workflow. We build it in Teams. We work together, collaborate on in Teams, which is our conference room. We store it in SharePoint. It's the library, right? That's the analogy I use. But how would people know, right? So if we put it here, how would the rest of the company know if there's something new that's posted? Well, either if people set up their alerts in the library, which not a lot do, I don't do it for all libraries, but what we do on a regular basis, we announce stuff in our Yammer environment. So we have a very active Yammer environment where anything new from marketing, we post it here. So like we have a new video, we have a new podcast. So this is the cafeteria example. Imagine the cafeteria. We would announce, hey, everybody, hope you're enjoying lunch or dinner. Just so you know, we have a bunch of new brochure. Go to the library, check it out. Or we have a new, right? So that's how the workflow is, right? The immediate team works together in Teams. We store the asset for everybody else in SharePoint. We announce or talk about it on Yammer. Okay. All right. We're right on the dot, 11 o'clock. Again, so grateful for this presentation. I hope that you all found great benefit. Don't be a stranger. Hit me up. And thank you again for attending this event. Enjoy the rest of the sessions. Like I promised, I'll drop the link in the admin and governance channel. Thanks again. Take care. Bye.